Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Engagement and Person-Centered Care, Assessing Preferences for Everyday Living. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. After this webinar today, you will receive a link to a survey to fill out to be eligible to receive your NAB and NCAP CEU hours. Please fill this out no later than Monday, May 21st at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Your lines will be muted during the call, and you'll have the opportunity to ask questions at the end of the session. Also, this webinar will be recorded and available on our website starting next week. At the end of this webinar, you will walk away with an understanding of the intricacies of person-centered care, how to use the Peli Tool in your work, the importance of individual preferences and how to embrace them using PAL cards, and why preferences matter. Today, we are honored to have Dr. Katy Abbott with us, an assistant professor of gerontology in Oxford, Ohio. She is currently working with the state of Ohio, where the Peli Tool is mandated for quality improvement in the state's 960 nursing homes. Our discussion will begin today with Link Senior co-founder and CEO, Charles D. Vilmorin. Charles is a certified dementia practitioner and has more than 9 years of healthcare and long-term care experience. Charles?
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Megan, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to conduct this webinar today with Dr. Katy Abbott. As you know, the drive for person-centered care in our industry is becoming more and more important. And as you might know, the philosophy behind person-centered care starts with the idea of knowing the person, right? If I don't know the person, I do not know how to best interact, which type of care, what kind of experience we want to create for that individual. Knowing the person is extremely important, and part of our healthcare process is this idea of assessing for the preferences of the individual and then integrating that in the plan of care. With the prevalence today of electronic health record, there's an idea also that some of that can be challenging because not all team members have access to the data that resides there. We found no better person to help us understand how to implement tools like this than Dr. Katy Abbott, given her experience, especially in the work that she's been doing with her team on the preference for everyday living inventory called Peli. Again, the Peli is a validated and reliable way to assess the resident and client important preferences. As a reminder, the first part of our section is going to be about understanding the need for engagement and person-centered care, and I will be going over some of these slides and then providing the rest of the session to Dr. Katy Abbott. So, first things first, why are we in the business as activity directors or life enrichment or rec therapists or even just a frontline staff? What is the importance of us providing engagement in a person-centered way? At Link Senior and other some of our partners, we love the idea of what it is that we're trying to do with our residents, with our clients, with the older adults. And I think that a great way to think about it is when we think about the person who came up with the hierarchy of needs, right, the pyramid of Maslow. We love this quote that says that a musician must make music, an artist must paint, a poet must write. It is, if he is to be ultimately at peace with himself, what a man can be, he must be. And I think this takes a whole new world when we consider the fact that some of the people that we care for do not have the ability to self-recreate. So how do we, as caregivers, make sure that the poet who must write can still continue to write? I think that as we are trying to understand how our field, which is the engagement field, evolves, I think that it's important, we think it's important to go back to the basic and understand from a leader in that field called Dr. Jessica Cohen-Mansfield, and she helped us define engagement as a way to occupy and provide a quality stimulus to people living with cognitive impairment and dementia. Now, where are we today? So I think we can all agree that there's a lot of potential in what it is that we do. Part of the data actually shows that if you look at a CDC report that came out in 2015, in the long-term care environment, a typical resident only get 11 minutes of engagement a day. I think we can all agree that that's not enough, and there are still places in the country where we don't get much more than the 3 Bs: bingo, Bible, and birthday. And these are all three great, but in no way can that match the preferences and the needs of every single resident that we have under our care. There are obviously deep kind of underlying reason why that is, right? On one hand, we do, as we said, have a very dependent population just because of the normal course of aging or dementia. Often the family isn't there much to come and help us as we engage the older adults. There isn't much of us, and that is probably one of the biggest reasons why people still receive today too much antipsychotic drugs and other types of drugs. So these are the underlying reasons. Now, the promising aspect is every type of research today shows that what it is that we're trying to do in the field of activities and person-centered care and engagement actually points to good results. And there's this concept, this framework, which most of us operate today under, which is this idea of wellness. The World Health Organization has provided guidance on that, but the important part is that it's now evidence-based and shown that every individual needs some kind of support, some kind of engagement, not only on some basic aspect, but that the fact that wellness is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not just the absence of infirmity or a disease, right? So part of that, we need to recognize that when we engage our population, a lot of us in the field of engagement are very focused on the right-hand side of a particular slide. We all like to talk about the behaviors of our residents. I mean, we spend a lot of time talking about it. But the point is that engagement needs to be supported across the aging spectrum, right? There's a lot to be said about how do we help residents on the left-hand side of the screen, which is more the self-directed type of activities. And as people progress in their recession, whether it's physical or cognitive or go down these paths, how can we help them being supported? And again, part of today's presentation is about how do we capture the preferences of each individual so that we are better suited to engage or help these residents stay engaged with who they are and what they like. I think that there's a core element to what it is that we do as activity directors, which is ultimately we're trying to assess and understand who are the residents. Based on that information, we're trying to come up with a plan that suits each individual, right? So, for example, somebody who likes Irish music would like to listen to Irish music. If somebody likes French music, we wouldn't want that person to listen to French music. So again, how can we personalize these plans? And then obviously we're having then the implementation. And obviously for some of us that work in the skill setting, but beyond that also just the idea of evaluating our program. I think that as we now understand what it is that we're trying to do is to assess, plan, implement, and evaluate everything we need. And once we get to the stage where we're doing that correctly, then we can say that we're doing very well and meeting the needs and the purpose of every single resident that's under our care. Now, as we highlighted before, the purpose of our discussion today with the help of Dr. Katy Abbott is really focusing on the assessment component. But I think that we all agree today that to understand preferences and drive person-centered care, we have to think about how do we move from paper to digital. A lot of us, when we look at these 4 different steps, are still carrying a lot of paper in that process, if that process happens all the time. So I think there's a lot of value to go beyond and think about digital tools. But with that, incorporating digital tool is a fantastic opportunity for us to then include evidence-based engagement tools, such as the Peli that we're going to be discussing afterwards. Now, the interesting component of the whole discussion, the timing of it, is that, as some of you might know, we're now 6 months into these new rules of participation, right? All the changes in regulation that happened back in November. And as a activity director, as somebody that works in engagement, these are very, very exciting times, because all the changes point towards us having to do a more person-centered work, taking into account the preferences of every single resident, especially the people that are dependent because of dementia or other reasons. And obviously, the more we can do that and the more we can show that, the more the entire engagement and activities field and profession will be elevated. So these rules, in a lot of aspects, are a big opportunity for us engagement professionals. So with that, again, I want to thank you for your time today, and I'm going to let Dr. Katy Abbott take it from here and really dwell into how do we assess the preference for everyday living of our residents, and describe a little bit her work with the Peli, the preference of everyday living instrument. Thank you. Dr. Katy Abbott, if you want to take it on.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you, Megan, for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here, and thanks to everybody that's on the webinar. If I don't have the ability to advance the slide, thank you. So what we're going to be talking about, I'm trying to, it doesn't look like I can advance it. If you could advance one more for me. Thank you. And so, as Charles very nicely laid out for us, our industry is moving toward a person-centered philosophy of care. And every definition that you will see of person-centered care seeks to understand an individual's preferences, goals, and values, and then to honor those throughout the care delivery process. But most providers lack techniques to objectively measure person-centered care, and in particular for quality improvement purposes. And so what I'll be talking with you, if you'll go to the next slide for me, what I'll be talking, and then one more, I'll come back to this one in a minute, I'll tell you about this. So what we'll be talking about today is about the Peli Tool, and then some ways to use it in quality improvement. And so the tool, as Charles referred to, is a tool that has been in development for almost 20 years now. It was initially developed and tested with a sample of about 550 home health recipients, and then we received funding from the National Institutes of Health to revise the Peli for a nursing home population, and we had over 350 older adults who helped guide the wording of the instrument. And the idea of this instrument is to assess the importance of a range of preference domains. And we sought to, again, keep it with a quality improvement possibility, and have a 4-point scale that participants can use, where they can rate a preference from very important, somewhat important, not very important, or not important at all. And the idea is for care team members to use the questionnaire to learn about resident preferences. All right, so a couple of examples here from the Peli, and you'll see some similarities, because the Peli heavily was heavily influenced the MDS section F. And so, for example, how important is it to you to choose what clothes to wear? So you'll recognize that from the MDS. And what the Peli then follows up to ask about is, if a participant or a resident or a client asks or says that that's very important, or somewhat important, or important but they can't do it, we suggest asking a few follow-up questions that you can see here in the nested items. So for example, what do you usually like to wear for the day? What do you like to wear to sleep? What jewelry do you like to wear? Do you like to carry a bag, watch, or wallet? Would you, would you like your clothes arranged in a certain way? However, you wouldn't ask those additional items if it was not very important, not important at all, or if they didn't respond. So you would simply move on to the next Peli item. And another item is, for example, how important is it to you to keep up with the news? And so again, if it's important, Well, you need a little more information to know in what ways do you like to keep up with the news. And so that's how the Peli is structured. There are 72 items in all. As we interviewed older adults, we asked, are we missing anything? And so they were able to contribute preferences that we might have been missing. You do not have to use all 72. Each item stands on its own, and so you can select from among the variety of items. And if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Some of our work over the past several years, we have tried to advance the science around preference assessment. And in particularly, we want to understand if someone says something is important today, will it be important in a week? Will it be important in 3 months? And so we have looked at that and been able to answer those questions. We also want to understand if something changes in importance, why? What are the contextual reasons why a preference may change? Is it because of their health? Is it because they've had an argument with another person and that person attends a similar activity and they do not any longer want to attend that activity? Is there something going on in terms of staff, the quality of the staff engagement? And so, or is it just simply the weather? And then finally, we've done work on how to use the Peli for quality improvement efforts. And as I mentioned, Peli items contributed to the development of the MDS Section F, and we have over a dozen peer-reviewed articles that stem from funding by multiple organizations. And what I always like to tell people is when you receive funding for something, it means that someone believes in your ideas and in the work you're doing. And we've been very fortunate to have a lot of people believe in our work. And if you could go to the next slide. And we'd be happy to send you articles. If you'd like, feel free to send me an email. So what happened a couple of years ago in the state of Ohio is that the Ohio Department of Medicaid implemented a statute and in terms of pay for performance. And so they required that nursing facilities utilize the nursing home version of the Peli for all of its residents. And this is a self-reported item that they check in their cost reports. And if they do check that they're using that, they do get an increase in their reimbursement per resident per day. Since then, the Peli has also been integrated into Tennessee's value-based payment model, and it's called the QUILTS program. So we see that the efforts of our of the science behind the Peli have become noticed by policymakers. And that's why they're starting to lean on the Peli in terms of usefulness for driving quality among nursing homes. If you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So when that mandate came out, as a researcher, I was unaware, first of all, that that mandate was happening, and I didn't think it was fair. Person-centered care and doing preference-based care is a big lift, and it takes more than just a provider to do this. And we wanted to be a part of the solution. We wanted to be partners in this effort. And so we asked for funding from the Ohio Department of Medicaid to support the providers in Ohio, but all of our materials are available for free to anyone, anywhere. And so we have a collaborative team that work across the state, and we're actually located in Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Ohio. We produce webinars, we create tip sheets, we have a monthly newsletter, we have filmed 2 training videos, and we're working on filming a 3rd that I can tell you more about. We interface with providers who are working out the kinks, and so, for example, they share policies with us. So we then ask for permission to share those policies on our website. We have a helpline where people can call about questions they might have about the Peli. We're developing quality improvement strategies. And I'll be talking to you about Compass, which is our care preference assessment of satisfaction, which is a technology solution for person-centered preference-based, person-centered care, quality improvement, and that's one reason why I was fortunate to come into contact with Link Senior, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. And as I mentioned, you can find all of the resources I'm going to talk about at our website, preference-based-living.com. Thank you. And I wanted to share 2 success stories from some of our Ohio providers to be able to put a little more flesh on the bones of what this project is. So one of the providers we worked with sent this story to us. The Peli is a very important tool in our facility as we are primarily rehab and therapy. The main question that has been so helpful lately is to know our residents' preferences for waking up. As many of our residents prefer to wake up later in the day, the Peli helps us to identify these residents so that their therapy schedules, bathing schedules, and meals can be changed accordingly. This has helped the residents because they're more likely to engage in their therapies and other scheduled activities throughout the day, knowing that they have had sufficient sleep and are going to be engaging at the prime of their day. It has also significantly improved the refusal rates, as residents would be too tired or weak when woken up at a different time than preferred. We have used this tool many times, and it helps to ensure their overall happiness and to get each day started on the right foot. And then, so that was a short stay success story. We have another success story about long-term, so a long-term resident. And so this one, while training our team on the use of the Peli Tool, we learned of the simplest request from one of our continuing care residents. She was frequently cold, not uncommon for an elderly person. While conducting the Peli with this resident, we learned one simple way we could enhance her quality of life. By putting a label on her thermostat to read, set at 74 degrees, we could ensure she stays warm. We also trained our partners to remember to offer a lap blanket anytime she leaves her room for meals, entertainment, or recreation of any type. We no longer hear any complaints or comments about being cold other than she thinks we don't have enough layers of clothing on ourselves. She knows we care about her comfort and have made improvements to enhance her comfort. Our only barrier is in remembering to offer the lap blanket at times. Partners from various departments are made aware of her preferences too. Housekeeping checks the thermostat each day after completing their duties before leaving the room. Room rounds are another opportunity to check the setting. Of course, nurses and CNAs are also in the loop. This was what some may consider a small preference, but what a difference temperature can make. And so those are just a couple of examples. You can go to the next slide, thank you. Those are just a couple of examples of real influence that we have seen with providers here. So another thing we ask providers to tell us about are their pain points or barriers. So what are the things that they struggle with doing? And one of the things that providers told us over and over is that they can use the Peli to find out about preferences, but they struggle to communicate those preferences across care team members. And that could be not just, the staff, but this could be volunteers, and it could be perhaps we have some that rely on a lot of agency staff who come in and don't know anybody. And so we worked collaboratively with our area nursing homes here in Southwest Ohio to develop what I'm going to talk to you about next, was a way to reference an individual's important preferences that could travel with them throughout the organization, such on the back of their wheelchair, or attached to a walker, or it can be in their room if they don't use one of those devices. And next slide, please. And go ahead to the next one. Thank you. So we developed a template, and again, everything's on our website, and for a personalized 5x7 preference card. And the cards were created for each resident and printed and laminated. The front, and I'll show you some examples in a second, the front of each preference card includes the individual's name and a short biography, which is probably information you're collecting already. Now, we've chosen to only use the activity and leisure items from the Peli, and that includes 33 items out of the Peli. There's also 8 items out of the MDS that you could use, because we wanted to steer clear of including any protected health information on the card. And so the back of the card is then personalized to highlight Peli recreation and leisure preferences that were reported as very important during the interview. Next slide, please. So here's an example of the front of a POW card. And again, imagine a 5x7 size. But this would be Sue's card. And Sue had her card completed on September 28th, 2017. So that could be, it can be modified. This template's downloadable. You can type in information that's useful. And so you can see here details just about her biography and her history, right? So that it's an easy conversation starter. Wow, you like Salisbury steak? So do I. You like the History Channel? What's your favorite? What's your favorite era to watch TV about? Again, I've been in our local homes trying these out where some people were cheerleaders, other people grew up on farms. So it's a way to very quickly, at a glance, pick something that you can have an immediate conversation with the individual that you may not know. And let's go to the back side of the card. And here's where the information from the Peli becomes integral. So now you have 6 categories that this person said were very important to her. Again, now, if let's say someone's becoming agitated, let's say that someone's expressing, some form of distress, I might be able to say, oh, wow, she likes dogs. Maybe we could bring our robotic pet by and see if, that might allow her a little bit of relief. Or maybe I can just talk to her about her dogs if she's able to communicate. Maybe I could play some music. I'll go get some Neil Diamond or Rolling Stones, right? So again, it gives care partners, volunteers, even, as I mentioned, floating staff, a quick opportunity to connect with the person. And let's go to the next slide. And what we've seen, we've been able to create about 80 of these cards and follow them over time, is that they have definitely been used successfully as conversation starters between staff, volunteers, and residents in every community we've been able to replicate this in. The residents told us they felt their preference cards gave the staff an opportunity to ask them questions and to get to know them better. Even staff who'd been caring for people for years learned new things. One unanticipated finding is that the residents told us that the preference cards encouraged them to talk to and get to know one another. So they wanted to read each other's preference cards. So again, when we're talking about meaningful activities, this kind of social engagement is at the heart of that type of opportunity. The residents reported that their cards brought them joy, made them feel recognized and important, and sparked conversations among residents and care team members. We were even able to get some news, some press, where a couple of TV channels came out and filmed some residents talking about their PAL cards and how important it was and how it made them feel like a person. So go ahead and let's go to the next slide. And here's some PAL cards in action. Again, you'll see here with them tied to wheelchairs and walkers. Again, there are solutions. If someone doesn't use a wheelchair or walker, then it becomes a little bit about, okay, where in the person's room can the card live? It obviously doesn't help as much if they're out and about across the community, but at least what we've realized is what providers have told us is that if it goes in a binder on a shelf somewhere, it will never be used. And so perhaps it goes, it hangs on inside of someone's dresser, their closet maybe, or maybe it's on the back of a picture frame in their room where someone could just flip the picture frame over and read some things quickly. And let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so as I mentioned, all of the information to do this, if you are interested in doing this work, we have tip sheets on our website. And if you'll go to the next slide, we have a template and a video. So here's the template that you can download for free and type in the information. Again, you can customize it. Maybe instead of having the date completed, you might want to put the person's birthday, just in the sense of maybe a month and a day. Maybe you might want to put something else on that card. So go to the next slide. One of our graduate students who was, fundamental to creating our PAL cards, created a little how-to video, again, that you can watch, and how to download the template and create PAL cards. Again, we recommend laminating them so that they remain a little more sturdy. If you go to the next slide, please. All right, and so you can go ahead and go advanced one more. Thank you. And so as I mentioned, we have all of our resources on our website. And the video, we have a little 3-minute animated video about why preferences matter. And we were going to try and show it to you through the webinar, but we were having troubles with the audio. So I would encourage you to go to our website at preference-based-living.com and watch this little 3-minute video. Under the Resources tab, you'll find, you can go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. Under the Resources tab, oh, this is the Peli. So the Peli Tools tab, if you're interested in looking at the Peli, the inventory, we have several tools for you. The Peli NH Full is all 72 items with all of the additional questions that can help you understand what their favorite activities are if they say it's important, or what they would like to have for a snack. The mid-level version doesn't have those additional items. It just has the 72 questions similar to how the MDS is worded. There's a Peli Terms of Use that gives permission for anyone in a healthcare organization to use the Peli for free. You'll see the MDS Section 3.0 Peli items. So again, this is the 16 items. So if you wanted to focus just on the 16 MDS items that you're already asking, but just ask those additional nested items in terms of, well, all right, if music is important to you, what kind of music? That instrument is for you. So it incorporates those 16 MDS items with the additional questions to get a little more detail. The example Peli policy is, as I mentioned, a policy that was created by an Ohio provider that they shared it with us, and we de-identified it. And then we have a version of the Peli that addresses or starts to address the needs of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender older adults, and so that's our Rainbow Peli. And then the last component there that it's not showing on the website, but there's an introduction. So if you're doing the Peli with a lot of short stay residents, there's a way that you can have more success by contextualizing it for them in their rehab process. So go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. And so this is our Resources tab. And here is where you can see any of our past newsletters. You can view any of our tip sheets. The brochure is another barrier that our providers mentioned to us, where people said, why are you asking us about our preferences? Residents and family didn't understand why they were asked about their preferences, and so we created a downloadable, customizable brochure where you can put your provider information on the back, print it out, and slip it into a move-in packet. Or, when you sit down to have the conversation with somebody, you can share this with them. But it just explains why their preferences are, why they need to tell you about their preferences so you can better tailor their care. And then all of the PAL card resources are in that PAL card link. We also have 2 training videos. One is, for example, you may have difficulty finding staff time to conduct Peli interviews. So maybe you want to use volunteers. Well, there's a training video on how to do the Peli interview so that you are not just sending people out without any training. It's a 22-minute video that we had professionally produced so that you can use. And then the second training video we have up there is about how to integrate your preference information into your care planning process. So once you have the assessment done, that's great, but then how do you use the information? And then our past webinars are on there as well. Let's go to the next slide. And then here's just a little more of a detailed look at the PAL card resources, again, that are available for download. You've got the PAL card tip sheet. You've got the samples of PAL cards that we've created. We have the customizable template. There's a couple of ways you could use the PAL card. If you wanted to use the PAL card, there's 2 interviews you could download here. The Peli PAL card is the 33-item Peli interview. That's what I mentioned that we've been using, and that pulls the 33 Peli items that ask specific questions about activity and leisure. And that's what you could use to create your PAL card. But there's also 8 items out of the MDS that you could use. And so we've made that 8-item version with those additional questions on that version to be able for you to download. And then there's some, in Ohio, we are in the middle of a quality improvement program or a QIP through our Ohio Department of Aging, and we have some additional resources for the providers. We have about 40 organizations that are doing this in their organization with some coaching support from us. And so there's some other information for them too that you might find useful. All right, and so let me see here if I can advance. Go ahead if you'll go to the next slide for me. Okay, so at this point, I want to stop for a second and talk to you a little bit about one of the major barriers to doing this work, and Charles alluded to this at the beginning. The Peli is a paper and pencil tool, and we are in a digital world. We cannot continue to work on paper and pencil. And so for the past 4 years, we have been working on creating, I'm not a technology expert, and so we wanted an app. And so we approached some computer scientists here at Miami University to say, here's what we want to do. We want an app, and we want an app that can help digitize the Peli and allow people to do some quality improvement. And they said, no, you really don't. You need a mobile responsive website. And so we've been working on developing Compass, which stands for the Care Preference Assessment of Satisfaction. And so we've built this system, but again, we are not experts in this area. And we're fortunate enough to connect with Link Senior. And this has been one of those very unique partnerships where our mission, vision, and values completely intersect and agree with one another. And so we are now actively working with Link Senior to bring this product to market for you. And we're so excited. So I wanted to just show you what some of the screenshots look like. It's not available yet, but again, we really want this to be made available to everyone. And the 16 MDS items will be available for free. And so again, this is something that we believe really passionately about, that we can't continue to do this in paper and pencil. So why would you want to use a tool like this? So as I mentioned, if you don't want to collect paper and pencil, you want a streamlined, more efficient way to collect preferences for the people you provide services to. If you want to do quality improvement, so you understand how to create care plans, and if you want to know that your care is aligning with the preferences of your clients, this is the tool for you. So let's go to the next slide, please. I might be able to do it. Oh, I think I have control now. Thank you. All right, so the first couple of slides here, you're just seeing how you will be able to come into Compass and you'll be able to create an account. And so there will be, someone at your organization will need to come in and create an account. But you'll be able to add individuals if you have neighborhoods. For example, if you might have what might be called in the non-person-centered language as a unit or a wing of maybe 20 people or so, 20 to 30 people, you can assign them to different neighborhoods. And then, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to see, as you go through and interview your clients, you'll be able to see these interviews. And then what you'll be able to do is this digitizes asking the Peli. And we're working on some other features too. So for example, for it to be able to just import your MDS questions into the Peli. So here's what it looks like in terms of, how important is it to you to take care of your belongings. You can see the responses there that you can collect, and you can see along the left-hand side where you can switch and go in between the questions that are on the MDS 16. And then So let's say this was a person who just recently moved in. You would be able to go through the 16 items of the Peli and then be able to print out a report that you could take to a care planning meeting, and you would have a list of, the 10 out of these 16 preferences from the MDS were important to this individual. So let's focus on these. We don't need to focus on preferences that are not important. So then what's going to happen? Maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks later, you're going to be prompted to come back and ask the individual, okay, you told us that it was somewhat important to take care of your personal belongings. How well do you feel this preference has been satisfied? And then the person can tell you they're very satisfied, somewhat satisfied, not satisfied at all. And then you might be able to take some notes about more details there. But what we're trying to do here is emphasizing the particulars that are going to help refine the care plan and give a basis for how to construct that care plan. Should I pay attention to something or not? All right, and here is what we love to be able to show. So this is a pie chart for this particular resident. And the idea here is to celebrate the success. That green, right? That 30% green, that means that it's an important preference and they are satisfied with that preference being met. And this is all made up data, by the way. All right, so the yellow, here's where we need to pay a little bit of attention. So this is something that was an important preference, but they're only somewhat satisfied that this preference is being met. And the red is an important preference that they're not satisfied that the preference is being met. And so what this does is this allows your organization to say, hey, look, we're doing great on these particular preferences with Derek. We need to pay a little more attention to the red and the yellow areas. How do we move those to green, right? So it gives you much more detail about how you focus your scarce resources, all right? And then what we also have is we have, let's see if it'll let me advance. I think I've lost, thank you. You can print these reports to take them to care planning conferences so that, again, you can share it with the care planning team, and it unfolds to give you the details about which items they're unsatisfied with, which items they're satisfied with. And then if we'll go to the next slide, we also have the ability to roll that up. So it's great to have the information about the individual, but what if you are an activities therapist for an entire neighborhood? You need a little more information. And so we roll each individual up into their neighborhood report. And what you're looking at here is a representation of an entire, let's say there's 20 people in this, on the report it says there's 34 people in this neighborhood. And if you look at the arrow on the blue arrow on the right, here's a sliding bar graph where you can see, all right, areas that have a lot of red, there's something going on at the neighborhood level. So this very first one, how important is it for you to choose between a tub bath, shower, bed bath, or sponge bath? There's a lot of red. So what's going on here? Maybe there needs to be a root cause analysis to see what can help the most people in this household or on this neighborhood. And this may be something that a supervisor may want to look at. Maybe they need to, maybe the bathing schedule needs to be reviewed for this particular neighborhood. And you can also, again, celebrate the green in this situation. But again, it helps give you data to be able to put your heads together and think about turning yellow and red to green. There's an old adage that if you don't measure it, you can't move it. And we believe that wholeheartedly. So if you don't know that people are dissatisfied with, their bath preference being met, how do you even begin to address it? And so this level of report allows you to be able to approach from a programmatic perspective how the plan of care for the neighborhood needs to be taken into account. For example, maybe the chaplain has quit. And so now people are unsatisfied with their religious service preferences being met. Maybe the pet therapy person has switched from dogs to bunnies, and people don't like bunnies. So again, this report is really helpful for targeting those scarce resources. All right, and let's show. So here's where, as you know, when you would log into your site, we would envision you coming to a dashboard. Again, this is, a prototype. One of the important things we wanted to focus on is to have a positive facing indicator. And that's that top left corner of congruence. And that notion is about how many of our preferences are being met. And so to celebrate the positive, we feel very passionately about. So here you see 24% indicate satisfaction across all their preferences. Again, this is just a made-up number. So, and we wouldn't also say that there's a goal of 100% here. The goal is to start measuring something so that you can improve, period. You may start at 24 and maybe you improved to 30%. Again, you're improving. And that's the part of the continuous quality improvement that we want to stress here. So what we also want to look here, you could see the community report below that congruence in the bottom left-hand corner. So here's, maybe you have 4 neighborhoods across your community. This rolls all 4 of those neighborhood reports up into a community level report. And so now, maybe as an administrator, you can look to see how your organization is doing across everything. In the middle, at the bottom row in the middle, here's an indicator where maybe you just want to track and see, do we have anybody who's recently moved in who needs their Peli completed? And this would say, no, there's nobody that needs their Peli completed, but we do have 33 follow-up interviews that need to be completed. And again, you can assign those interviews to any number of individuals. On the far right-hand side, the top and the bottom are some scrolling or carousel types of just fun facts. So, what's the preference that's most important for your community? What's the preference that's the least important for your community? And, just to give you some information, again, to help guide the care. And these are things where, as we would roll this product out, we would hope to seek feedback from all of you who are interested in using this so that we can customize this. And in the middle there, the satisfaction over time. Here's where, as you continue to collect your data over time, you're starting to see the impact of your focus, right? So you're seeing a kind of a flat satisfaction over time. And then in May, here we are, we're starting to see the fruits of our labor here. And so there's a combination here of things to celebrate, things to audit. Are you missing folks? Is there a need for, again, another root cause analysis? What types of creative interventions can be put into place? Where should the community focus on improvement? And so again, it just gives you the ability to move the measurement. And so let's go to the next slide here. And I just want to leave you with a couple of information on how to interact with us. So as I mentioned, we are on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, we have a monthly newsletter. You can go to our website and sign up for our newsletter. We have our helpline and our email that we address. And we want to provide support. We have funding for another year to do this work, and we are also going to be asking for more funding to continue this partnership because we have been so fulfilled by working with providers and seeing them just be thrilled to have someone who feels like, they feel like someone's got their back. And that's what we want to continue to be able to do. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right. And so as I mentioned, Preference-Based Living is our website. Feel free to reach out to us. We love to hear pain points and barriers because that's the information we take back to our team and we say, okay, team, let's problem solve. How can we remediate some of these barriers? And let's go to the next slide, please. As I mentioned, there's a newsletter that we send out only once a month, and we never share that list, so feel free to sign up for our newsletter. And forward again. And here's a little team member of us. Of our team, we're made up of clinical psychologists, computer scientists. I'm a gerontologist. We've got lots of students engaged at the undergraduate and graduate levels. We have public health professionals involved. And again, our mission is to make nursing homes better places to live and work by honoring resident preferences using the Peli. And so maybe one more slide, and I think I'll be turning it over. So here's sort of a segue for me now to turn it back over to Charles in terms of looking at resident needs and preferences. The graph you're seeing here is, again, a look at some data that we have been working on from a match tracker perspective, which looks at another type of indicator. So before I talked about a satisfaction indicator, but this could be an indicator where does the attendance in activities match a preferred activity that a resident has initiated. So for example, if they said music was very important, are they attending your music activities? And if not, why not? And so again, to give you a little more detail. So there's additional work that we're doing with Link Senior to make these tools available to providers. And so at this point, let me turn it over to Charles and to some questions.
Thank you so much, Katy. It was an amazing presentation. I think that some of the things that you alluded to made me think of a quote that says that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And I think that some of the things that you were referring to about how do we know who the individual is and care better for them is essential. I don't think anyone would imagine a world where in 5 years or even less, we're not using data. And the way we use data is not to measure our performance. And the performance would be about, again, how do we understand the older adult that we serve, look at what we've been doing for them, and optimize that. I think that we sit at a very interesting time for this field of engagement, activities, rec therapy, life enrichment, which is how do we work to help our residents, our older adults, live with purpose. With that, I wanted to share for some of you that are not aware of it yet, that we have a big campaign to fight ageism, and it's called Old People Are Cool. And it's the idea that we want to celebrate that everyone, including the older adults, are as important as anyone else and actually cool. If you want to visit the website, it is oldpeopleare.cool. We have a store and all the proceeds go to the Alzheimer's Association, and we invite everyone and all of you to participate in that discussion. With that, I wanted to open it up to questions. We've actually received quite a few. I think that a lot of them will be geared towards you, Katy, and I'll start with the first one, which is we had a few people ask about the fact that the Peli could be used for any type of setting, but obviously the MDS is not present in the assisted living setting. How would you recommend that we as assisted living professional implement the Peli there?
That's a great question. And so what we've tried to do is make tools that can go across settings. And so what I would recommend is downloading the Peli Tool and also downloading our tip sheet number 1, how to get started using the Peli, and go through the items and see what are the items that your particular organization, whether it's assisted living or skilled nursing, may want to focus on, and pick 10 to 12 items to pilot test. Maybe you want to focus in on personal care. Maybe you want to focus on recreation and leisure. Maybe there are some areas that your organization really shines with, and you want to be able to start measuring that. Maybe there's some areas where you want to develop more capacity. And so absolutely, this is relevant to assisted living. And what you can do is sort of take a look at those couple of resources and see what items may work for you the best. We've tried to never say something that this is the way to use something, because we think every organization has a different culture, a different level of resources, different support from leadership. And so we've tried to make tools that are that you're able to go in and pick what works for you. And so that's where I would start.
Great, thanks so much, Katy. Another question, and I think we're getting quite a few questions regarding the PAL card, and one of them, which obviously is very important, is what is a good way to get consent to put the PAL card on for the residents and to use it in our community?
That's a great question. So what we've done, obviously for people who are able to talk with you and give consent, we ask them. Simply, we show them. So when we go to the interviews, or when, somebody in your organization may go to an interview, take a sample PAL card with you, show it to the individual and say, hey, we'd like to create one of these for you. What do you think? Would you be interested in that? And then if they say yes, obviously go forward with the interview, make the card and come back and show it to them and say, here's the PAL card we created for you. Can you check it? Is it right? Did I capture your preferences? And then ask them, where would you like it to live? Can we place it here on your wheelchair or walker so other people can read it? If they're a private individual, they may not want that to happen. And you may say, well, could we leave it in your room to where our staff members could view it? And so again, it's about respecting this individual and their rights. They can absolutely refuse to do it, and that should be respected as well. But we have been having great success with, again, people have loved these cards. They're eager to use them. And if someone isn't able to give consent, we then ask the family. And generally the family is delighted to have this information shared as well.
Great, thank you, Katy. I think we have time for maybe one last question, and actually it's a very important one, which is how would you use the Peli for people that have a mild cognitive impairment or actually a diagnosis of dementia? Any recommendations there?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So what our research has shown is that people can reliably report their preferences and have dementia at the same time into certain stages. So into the mild and moderate stage, they can report their preferences pretty reliably. Now, once you start getting into severe dementia, obviously, communication and processing becomes impaired, and it's more difficult. And so what we recommend is approaching the individual on 3 different days and 3 different times to start the conversation about their preferences. And if at each point they are unable to provide you with information, then we suggest that it's probably not best to get the information from the individual. And at that point, you have some options. You want to seek information from a proxy. And that proxy could be a family member or a friend. And it could also be observations from your staff, and in particular, your direct care workers, the people who are interacting with these individuals all the time. And we do have a tip sheet. I think it's tip sheet number 3 on how to engage with proxies. And so that has some tips on how to do that. And that's also the 3rd video that we're shooting this year. And we hope to have it out by the end of the year with some tips and suggestions for engaging with proxies.
Thank you so much, Katy. I think we'll move to the last section of our webinar today, and I'll let Megan wrap up. Thank you again.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon, everyone. I would like you to save the date for our next webinar, which is happening on June 21st at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. It will be with Dr. Susan Levy, and it will be about the new rules of participation and engagement. This afternoon, you'll be receiving an email with a CEU survey that you will take to show that you participated on today's webinars, and so that you can receive your certificate of CEU completion on Monday. Again, a reminder, please fill out that survey no later than Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. The certificate will go out Monday afternoon to all of those who participated. And again, we look forward to seeing you on June 21st, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.